Cheers for doing it as well, man. I appreciate you taking the time to do it.
Oh, naturally, naturally.
So, how did your sort of journey into music start?
Man, that's a great question. I think for me, it was always about writing. For me, I mean, I picked up, I started playing guitar when I was, I think, about 8. I'm from Chicago originally, and there's a really amazing sort of folk school there called the Old Town School of Folk Music, and my parents enrolled me there when I was, quite young, 8 or so, because I kept talking about how I wanted to play. But it was really sort of immediately there that I realized that I was much less interested in playing the guitar than sort of using the guitar to write music. I remember like the first day I had a guitar in my house, I was like not knowing a single thing about how to play it or any chord or whatever. I was, just sort of plunking away at stuff, trying to write something. And I think that's sort of always been my impetus. Whenever I pick up an instrument, I play all sorts of things now. It's always just sort of been, oh, can I pick up, the banjo or the mandolin or something with the intention of trying to figure out, what's inside that. I mean, there's like a great Noel Gallagher quote where he talks about how like every guitar has a song in it. And I sort of feel that way about all these instruments, where it's sort of like I'm just trying to find whatever song is in the instrument that can hopefully, I can breathe through me and hopefully come out of it. And so it's that sort of desire has led me to a lot of different, like I said, instruments, a lot of different projects, a lot of different, sort of venues, outlets for music. And the last few years, it's really settled me into the Paul Sylvester project.
I'd love that ethic with instrument. I tried to learn the guitar, but I couldn't get my head around the chords, so I gave up on them. And I tried the drums as well, and I gave up on that. And I even tried the ukulele, and I couldn't even do that. I tried to learn like it was a song off YouTube, and I gave up. So I do this now. This is my way into music.
It's fantastic. It's fantastic. Everybody's got their way in. Everybody's got their little entry point in, which is great. So yeah, there's room for us all.
Yeah, glad. Is there any sort of artist or bands that inspired you early on?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, my parents um, were super instrumental for me in a way that, surely they don't think they were really concerned with me being very popular at school. They uh, really sort of drilled a lot of amazing music into my head when I was a kid. Um, my mom would do this thing that she called, this term, I feel like has sort of lost its meaning over the years, but at the time she would, this was in the 90s, she would call it, classic rock listening hour or something. And or classic rock education was how she called it. And basically, like, I'd come home from school and she'd just throw on some album that she loved, and her favorite band was always the Stones. And so we would, I just had these, very sort of formative memories of listening to like Flowers by the Rolling Stones, the record, just over and over and over again when I was a kid. And I sort of think about how so much of the way that I approach song structure and album structure comes from those moments. So I think that, while they're these big, sort of pillar artists like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones that obviously are informing so much of what I do, I think, recently in the last few years, I've really sort of grown, you know, this developed deep affection for a few bands. I think probably first and foremost is a band called The Replacements,
Yeah.
which is big in certain circles and other folks don't really know them at all. But amazing band out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, really. And they, like I said, from Chicago, they're sort of one of the great Midwestern American bands. And so there's just so much in their songwriting and in their approach to, uh, yeah, I guess approach to everything from sort of packaging their music to thematically approaching their yeah, I guess their subject matter that feels so important to me and feels so relevant, especially today when I feel, they were a very rough around the edges band, which feels very, uh, especially today, feels very refreshing um, in a time when everything is feeling a little bit polished for my taste. And so yeah, let's say the Replacement's probably the most influential band for me over the last 5 years.
Oh, cool. Did you find anything like challenging when you were starting out, or have you sort of just went with the
Yeah,
flow?
man. Oh my God, it's always tricky. I was in I've been in New York now for 10 years. And shortly after I arrived, I was very lucky to meet doing um, doing a job. I met this wonderful musician named Armando Gutierrez, and he and his brother and I, we actually started at this point, this was in 2017. We started a country rock band called Saddlemen, and we played, you know, that was for me, that was the gift of a lifetime because it felt like, you know, Armando had been in the city a little longer than I had. He knew the ropes a little bit more. It wasn't his first, band, so to speak, or first adult band. And it was through him that I was really sort of able to get an understanding of what it's like to play live music in New York and what it's like to play live music regularly, repeatedly. And so it was really the opportunity to, I guess this is all to say, I feel very lucky sitting here today, whatever, 9 years later, where I feel that when push comes to shove, the thing that I feel most confident in is the performance and the music and being able to connect with a crowd or something like that. And I'm also so lucky that it's still the thing that I love to do the most. And so uh while at one point that may have been, I remember our like first few shows where I'm basically just like blacking out the whole time. I have no, not because I'm drinking, just because I'm so nervous. I'm just, like
Yeah,
I don't really remember what's happening. Um, and so I feel so grateful now to be at a place where that part of being a musician is not only, which of course it's the most important part, but is also for me the most fun part. To your question, I think the hardest part is trying to figure out how to, first of all, try to always keep in touch with yourself. I think I've made a lot of you sort of try to figure out not only who you are as a person, but who you are as a musician. And you sort of use your music to try to explore those ideas, or at least I use my music to try to, really, dig deep with myself and try to figure out what I'm going to present to the world. And I think that's the part that is always the hardest because I mean, nobody ever really, everybody's always evolving. It's really trying to hit a moving target. Um, and it can be tricky when, for instance, there's quite a long delay between when I'm first writing a song and when it actually ends up in the world. And the person I was when I was writing, sometimes it can feel, oh well, that feels very different from the person I am today when I'm releasing. And so it can be really challenging to sort of bridge those gaps. Luckily, and I think some of the time, I end up shelving songs. I'm shelving things that I just don't relate to anymore, and that's always very hard because a lot of the time you spent, a great deal of effort, time, and money to get a song ready, and when you feel that it's not quite you anymore, I think that's maybe one of the biggest
you
challenges.
said I've spoke to someone recently who said exactly the same thing. So I asked him, I think I asked him if he would go back to some of his older songs he hadn't released and release them, and he says he can't because he doesn't connect with them anymore, and it just doesn't feel right releasing them. I thought I never really thought of it like that.
Yeah, it's a strange feeling. I'm not quite sure how to communicate it, but it's just sort of you sort of feel, maybe it's sort of like if you're dating somebody and you realize you don't really feel it anymore or
Yeah.
something. But there's times when you're gearing up to release something, you're gearing up to really put your weight behind something, and you just don't, like for me, I just don't feel that fire anymore, which is such a strange feeling because at one point I felt enough fire to, like I said, to put in the effort to write it, record it, to get that stuff on the page and sometimes on tape or whatever. And to not, yeah, get it over the finish line is a strange feeling. And the first time it happened, I felt so terrified, right? It's sort of a crisis of faith. Oh, is this what I'm meant to do? Does this mean, what does this mean for me? And luckily to your point, there's enough musicians out there have shared this experience, who know this experience all too well. You can sort of find solidarity in that. Uh, but it is such a strange process when you have to put something away for after working on it for so long. And it does sort of feel like a miracle when something does actually see the light of day. It's sort of like, wow, what did you? Oh, I really made something there that you know feels right for me, feels right for what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, well, I love Get By. That was the song that my friend Az sent me. He sent me Get By, and then like I found because I listen to it at work and stuff as well, just to get like because if I'm gonna chat to someone, I think I've got to get to know their music at least.
Yeah, thank you.
But like I find it's one of them songs that you just sort of hum along when you're not even knowing you're doing it. Like I was doing it when I was getting ready for this, and I hadn't even had it on. I had it on today. Well, I had it on this morning at work, but I felt like it's a great song. Like I love it. It's brilliant.
Thanks, man. Thank you so much. Thank you
What
so.
inspired it?
That's a great question. I with Get By, I think there's a few things. There's a band that I adore. One of my favorite bands is a band called Howdy, and they're spelled Hovvdy. Two guys out of Texas who play this sort of great, um, I don't know how, like sort of lo-fi, um, alt rock kind of feel. They're amazing writers and they're amazing musicians, and they play. It's not too irregular, but they play all of their songs in not open G is a pretty standard guitar tuning, alternative tuning, but they actually do a fun thing where they actually raise that open tuning up a full step. So they're playing an open A flat, if that means anything. And I had never played around with this tuning before, and I got sort of hyper obsessed with this band and seen them a bunch of times. I think probably behind the Replacements, they're the most influential band for me. Really worth checking out to whoever
Yeah, I'll
is
look for
listening
them.
here. Really cool band. But I started playing a ton of songs with that tuning in mind, and I think it really has this sense of melancholy in it that is very hard to find. Just to strum an open guitar and get those kind of overtones out of the instrument is extremely rare, I think. And so I started playing with this tuning all the time. I wrote probably 25 songs in the tuning, and I think Get By was the one that came out the strongest at first. It actually, some songs form right away. They just like literally you sit down and in 10 minutes you have a song, and that can actually be really scary because I'm sort of thinking, oh, this can't be good. Like it just happened too fast. Sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes great work comes out of those sessions. The With Get By, it was a bit more of a struggle. Those pieces came together very slowly, um, and the words took forever to come for Get By. For a long time, uh, it was a complete, while the music came together very quickly. Thematically, I wasn't sure what this song was about at all, and there were these other choruses where it was like, the chorus is like one hand waving to the other. It was some idea about like distance and sort of detachment, which I think is sort of still in the song a little bit. But I realized that uh, it didn't really communicate what I wanted to communicate, which was this sort of sense of disenchantment that so many people feel today, and however it didn't really. So you can have one hand waving to the other or whatever, which implies this distance, but it doesn't really communicate any of the solidarity that you need, any sort of the community that is also very important in that. It can be very easy for me to get pretty down, and uh, in those moments, it's always so important for me to like force myself to find community, to find whether it's my wife or my oldest friends, to like push myself to communicate what I'm feeling or whatever. And so this idea of um, you and me forever, we're doing it together, felt very important. It felt like a very important way to communicate the specific idea of that song. And I was literally on I was literally on a sometimes when I'm on a flight, just sort of force myself to play back voice memos or demos or things like that and just throw lyrics at the wall. Like what am I really trying to move here? And yeah, I remember I was literally walking to go to the bathroom on this one flight, and the idea of the main hook, so we're gonna get high, sort of came came to me there, and I just sort of followed that idea into the really the full form of the song. So hope that makes sense.
See, when you do you produce your song, are you a perfectionist with it, or do you like having some imperfections in there and
Yeah, I really do like having some imperfections in there. Um, I
it always
really
makes it
do, and
sound better, I think, when there's a bit of
I
imperfection.
think I couldn't agree more. And I think I'm very lucky to have found this. My producer here in New York is a guy named Billy Menino, who's um, and assistant producers Joe Rom. These two guys are fantastic. They're actually, one thing that I really love about them is they're very much in uh, kind of the hardcore scene here in New York. They play, they work with a ton of, or if it's not hardcore, then it's sort of louder rock bands. Billy's worked with a bunch of great bands, including one called Oso Oso, which is a really, really great group out of Long Island. But I realized that there was something special where I took, if I, when I'm taking these songs that are, what I would consider, I'm always not quite sure what to call my music, whether it's, noir Americana or Gotham country or, sort of these Midwestern rock songs that I'm writing on an acoustic guitar. I'm always really interested in how they sound when I bring them into Billy's studio, which is this sort of cavernous room in Queens, where normally he's recording guitars at 110 decibels, and I think because of that, there is this like sense of space and sense of imperfection and sense of not even you can read imperfection as just humanity, right? Like there's this sense of, I would hope, this human sense where the song is not necessarily perfect and it's sort of falling apart in places and it's squeaky in other places, and um, it's just my favorite recordings are imperfect, and
Yeah.
so I'm always trying to capture a little bit of that myself. um, and I've been lucky to find some collaborators that um, share in those goals with me.
Yeah, I love that. Well, how do you feel about the way streaming sort of changed the landscape with music? Because I always think, for me, as a music fan, I hate streaming. I liked it better when you had an album to buy and you'd listen to the album. And but I don't know what it's like maybe for an artist. If it's like, do you prefer it or?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, got my vinyl up here on the
Yeah,
shelf
as
behind
I had
me.
the book.
Yeah, it's really terrible. I mean, my my friends are all sick of me, I think, hearing about, sick of hearing me talk about, rail against streaming and the streaming economy, and how people are listening to music. And even within streaming, I met somebody at a party recently, and we basically talked for 3 hours after we realized that we both subscribed to we both used Tidal to listen to music, which is, not a great software. However, it pays the artists way more, and generally speaking is the
Oh, does it?
highest quality you can find. Yeah, it pays the artists much more, which is great. A little more, it's like marginally more expensive. It used to be way more expensive, but they brought it down. This is not this is all to say, yeah, it's a luckily I sort of feel like we're reaching a tipping point. um I don't know if you've heard about the artist Sturgill Simpson, but he just announced that
I've seen
yeah,
things. Yeah,
so his next album is going to be fully offline, right? Only vinyl, cassette, and CD, and the radio, I guess. Um, and I wonder to what extent that's going to move the needle, and uh, I hope, I hope it does. I hope it does, because I think, if he sells 100,000 copies of his vinyl, he's going to make as much money, or his project or his team will make as much money as if he got, something like 200 million streams or 300 million streams, 250, I think, or something like that. And so it's that kind of, it's a really, it's nice that the streaming, of course, it's nice that the streaming sites give people access to music, right? That's what their promise was. But at this point, I think it's, especially with the introduction of so many AI artists and so
yeah.
much,
I hate AI.
yeah, of course, yeah,
Hate.
of course. And it's just, that's just a way for the streaming companies to, develop their own AI artists to recoup more of the profits themselves. And so it's it does feel, at least here in New York, that more and more shows that I go to, artists are taking time out of their show to, you know, to try to implore their audiences to sort of change their listening habits. And I hope that we're approaching, like I said, I hope that we're approaching a shift in that way. But you never know. You never know.
Yeah, let's hope so. I want albums to matter again.
Truly, truly, truly. It's really something that I always try to struggle where it's like, oh, am I just am I just fighting for this because it's what I'm used to, or is it what I grew up with or something? But in this case, I think that the we settled on that art form, that sort of length of project for a reason, this medium for a reason, and um, yeah, I couldn't agree more. It'd be great if that mattered in the mainstream in a way that it hasn't in a while.
Do you think, see with the streaming side of it, do you think artists are like more connected, or do you think they're more isolated now because of it as well? Because you don't really, you just pump music out online, don't you? Say some people don't even tour or gig anymore. They just put the music online and
That's a great question because I think it's hard because I think a lot of artists now, touring is really the way for artists. It's really the only way for, other than selling merch or something like that, for artists to make money. And even when you're on tour, especially here in the States, there's so many other entities that are taking profit from artists that it can be even razor thin margins there to sort of break even. So I think it's interesting. I think my assumption is that the internet is just probably just an isolating force in most ways, although maybe too early to tell in that experiment. So by that logic, yeah, absolutely, there would be this isolating force of the internet for artists, of course. Um, and this is where I feel very grateful to be in New York, where there's still so many. I mean, there's fewer than maybe when I first moved here, but there's still so many venues that are supporting independent artists where you can actually get and mix and meet all these, meet new people, um, meet other artists, and sort of get that sense of community, because it's so important. And to your point, there are so many people that are just putting music out, and God bless them. They should have the opportunity to put that music out. But it just is too bad that the standard that's been set is that they also then shouldn't really be paid for that work, which is really hard. And that, of course, can be isolating as well.
yeah, yeah, it's a good point. Is there any of your songs that like you've written it means the most to you, sort of thing, like
That's a
specific
great
one?
question. Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's funny. I'm really in the process. I'm in the process right now of putting new music together. So there will be you know, new music coming out. We'll see. Ideally by the summer, but we'll see. And there's a bunch of songs there that I'm really attached to, but that could also be because I find once you release a song, it sort of stops being yours. It's becomes everybody else's. And while you're recording, they're very much, it's like those are your babies, and
Yeah.
you're still working on each one. I think it's interesting. Probably the one that means, yeah. I mean, I'll always have an extremely close connection to my song "Feel the Same," just because this is the first song that I decided to release under my own name, right? And Paul is my Paul was my one grandpa's name, and Sylvester was my other grandpa's name, and so it felt like a very momentous occasion to release music under my name and their names, and so "Feel the Same" always means a lot to me. And also because it was the first, back to our earlier conversation, but it was the first song where in the studio it all just sort of came together in a way where I was like, oh fuck yeah, I can release this. Like
Yeah.
this is the one. This is one, because I had, I think, recorded 3 or 4 songs that I had that was like, oh, this is all shit. Like I just had to keep digging, and so "Feel the Same," really means a lot to me. And then, however, more recently, I think the song that has always sort of felt like the yeah, I don't know, the place that I always had the softest spot for, the song that I feel the softest when I think about, is "The Only Thing," which is the last song that I released.
I listened. I like that song as well. It's a great song.
Thanks, man. Yeah,
Like that
thank
and
you. I think
"Dying in the Light."
thanks. Yeah,
Great song as
yeah. I
well.
so appreciate you. Yeah, I really, um, I like both of those songs. I think they sort of have a similar sentiment really, where you're just sort of songs about exposing yourself and you know sort of like lashing yourself to a tree in the middle of a storm. It's just sort of like what do we, or come what may. Uh, I know what matters, and I know sort of what I'm striving for, and how I feel about it. And so, yeah, I think I really like both of those songs. The only thing I think what pushes it over the edge for me is I think there's some production things on that song that I'm quite proud of as well. Just some elements of, I really like that. It's probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite, guitar solo I've ever written in that song. And it's nothing too crazy. I just think it's melodic in a way that really fits the song, and I really like a couple of those harmony lines a lot. And it just song feels really cohesive to me. And I when you I often think that when you go to see a show, I think whatever the second song in a show is, I often sort of think is a great indicator of what the artist is really interested in. I'm not sure why I haven't backed this up with anything, but it feels like, if you come out and open a show with something, you usually want to get the people's attention. And then once you have their attention, what are you going to do with it? What is the next thing you're going to say? And I always do the only thing then. It feels like
Yeah, it's a great
what I
song.
need to, if I get their attention, this is what I want to leave, not leave them with. This is what I want to sort of try to keep them with. So hopefully that makes sense.
Cool. Is there any sort of dream collaborations that you'd maybe want to do in the future?
Wow. What an amazing question. Um, I think, I think, it's hard to even imagine. I think I have worked with, I've worked with so many people on songs that, I sort of have like a network of collaborators here in New York that I really, really like. And so it's very hard for me to imagine opening that up into a wider group, and especially a group of more established artists or something. I mean, there's be an amazing opportunity to write songs with so many different people. I think perhaps for me, it's less about maybe collaborating on individual songs and more like, oh man, it'd be amazing to share a bill with some
Yeah.
artists.
Yeah, yeah.
There's
We'll make
some
that the
artists.
question then. If you could share a bill with any artist.
Yeah, man, it's hard. There's so many. I mean, it would be truly, I think just based on timeline, I mean, I think that, you know, getting my name anywhere on a bill with Howdy, that band, would be just the honor of a lifetime, uh, just because they've been so influential. Um, but we'll check back in like 3 years on that
Yeah,
one.
when it happens, I'll come back to
When it happens,
you.
I'll text you when it happens.
What's next for you then?
Great question. So, like I said, putting together this new, I think it'll probably end up being an EP that, or if not, it'll be sort of something sort of, maybe I think EP length is probably the best way to put it. Yeah, really gearing up for what hopefully will be planning for the music to be done. Like I said, hopefully in May, and then can really spend some time working on the live show, touring, possibly touring. I really have to sort of hit the ground running here in New York. Have a couple shows lined up just in New York, and that I haven't quite announced, announced yet, but are confirmed. And so I'll be announcing those, and then really try to roll out this music. And I'm really excited about how this new stuff sounds. I think I've really sort of found, sort of hit my stride, and like I said, with my studio collaborators, and just with the writing process, and it feels very focused right now in a way that is very, very gratifying. And anybody else who's a writer who's listening will know is not always the case. So whenever those moments happen where things are flowing, it's a real feel extremely grateful.
Ah, cool. Well, that's it really. That was like the gist of it, man. I enjoyed that. It was good.
Jay, yeah, so appreciate you reaching out, man. I mean, truly, it's such an honor. So I thank you very much.